Hello, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is now already our second special podcast because we have a wonderful guest here in Vienna and we are talking about this. Okay, Jens, you brought a nice guest here to our podcast. Please introduce him to me and our followers.
Well, he brought himself happily for the anniversary of Franz Schmidt, and it is Mr. Beerman, Jonathan Beerman from London, who has, of course, just recently recorded all the symphonies of Franz Schmidt.
All of them, how many they are?
4 only, but
Four, okay.
not the first recording, but definitely the best.
Okay. How much money did you get from him?
I was about to say, I'll pay you later.
Okay.
No, and we wanted to take the opportunity of Jonathan being here in Vienna to talk about Franz Schmidt, whom we all love to various degrees, who wrote some really fantastic music, even well beyond the symphonies, who is perhaps among the more reasonably known unknown composers of that era, of the post-Zemlinsky, high romantic, truly Austrian vein. And well, shall we do just that, huh?
And it's still a discovery. I mean, it's sad to say, but also in Austria, Franz Schmidt is still a discovery at his music. Coming back to your wonderful recording, I mean, how does you're a British conductor, a young British conductor, how a young British conductor comes to the idea to focus all his power to Franz Schmidt?
Well, thank you for calling me young. I don't necessarily feel it, but...
After the recording.
Yeah. Well, I first came across Franz Schmidt nearly 20 years ago now. So when I was at college, I used to go to the library, and there was a great LP and tape collection. And I would just pick something up, which essentially I just didn't know. I'd go and find a score, and I'd listen to it. And one day I found Zubin Mehta's recording with the Wiener Philharmoniker of Schmidt 4. Found a score, listened all the way through, and was absolutely blown away by it. It did something to me which very few pieces do. There are other pieces which do this, where you are completely consumed within the piece. You're not listening to it, but it somehow surrounds you. You become part of it. Sort of got my interest. I then went and found the other symphonies. I found the other recordings, and some years later, I was able to start performing it. I first performed at Bazali in Ankara in Turkey. It was the first time I performed Franz Schmidt.
In Ankara, really?
Ankara with the Bilkent Symphony Orchestra.
So Turkish people listening to Franz Schmidt in Ankara?
Absolutely.
3 of them, or the hall was full? Or?
Sold out concert.
Okay.
Absolutely gorgeous. And then I built on it, and then I started sort of thinking and wanting to make a recording, and it was suggested that I make a recording of something. And the question I wanted to ask was, why record something? I mean, obviously one answer is for my own vanity, and I'm sure there is plenty of vanity within this, but I wanted something else. I wanted something that was meaningful.
More than another Beethoven 5.
More than another Beethoven 5. More than just, this is my interpretation. And partly because of the Jubilee, partly this was before the Paroyevi recording had even been announced. But mostly from the music, from what I felt I was sort of finding in the music, I felt that there was more to this music than had been put on disc already.
Thanks to our colleagues from Accentus, we can watch a bit how Jonathan did a recording of Franz Schmidt symphonies. Let's.
when I was putting together this project 4 or 5 years ago, many of the people I spoke to either had never heard of Franz Schmidt, or their very first really strong, profound musical experience had been Franz Schmidt. I think the thing that really draws me to Schmidt's music is his tenderness and his care. His music is completely lacking in bombast, in violence or aggression. Even at its loudest, which the catastrophe moments in the Fourth Symphony or the finale of the Second Symphony, it never goes over the top. I find his music really extraordinary. It's such well crafted. It's every single note is in the right place and is necessary. He built his music up from counterpoint. So beginning with these very small gestures, and then making them more and more complex and more beautiful. Within each line there's this sense of gravity, of really pulling you. The result of that is that for me, every single note of his music is beautiful, necessary, and is part of leading you somewhere through his music. It's music which is deeply emotionally powerful. It'll hit you straight away, and it will take you on a journey which is nuanced and complex, and needs your presence at every moment along the way, but is so worthwhile and so rewarding if you follow it.
How many years are between the symphonies when they were composed?
I mean, it's most of his life.
Okay.
So the first one is, he started sketching when he was 19.
Okay.
And then he finished the fourth in 36,
Okay.
I think.
So 3 years before he died.
So 3 years before he died.
Okay. As I just said, that Franz Schmidt touches your heart so much. Why he is still so, let's say, so totally unknown? Not totally, but very unknown, or less known.
I think that's a complex question with a sort of myriad of different reasons. I mean, let's not forget, our music world is an industry. We sell music. We don't always sell music. It's not the only thing we do. But I mean, you look at what Bernstein did for Mahler, who was very unknown in the early 1950s, and Bernstein put him back on the map. He had an ambassador. Schmidt has never really had an ambassador. The person it should have been was Herbert von Karajan. Would have been the obvious if he'd have done a Schmidt cycle and done it around the world.
Did he ever record any Schmidt? Do you know if he conducted Schmidt?
Yeah, he conducted little bits. There's an amazing performance of the Intermezzo. But when Herbert von Karajan was young and studying in Vienna, Schmidt had told him he would never become a real musician.
Ouch. Okay.
So he never recorded Schmidt's music and didn't like it.
But there is a one shot, no? Like we had at Sinding with the Rustle of Spring. There is a one shot great hit from Schmidt. Yes. This is the one of the intermezzos or intermezzis from Notre Dame, and I could do this recording in 1988. Oh my shit, I'm so old. 1988, and we will listen a bit. I'm sure you recognize.
I mean, you just very casually said, "Oh, famous piece from Notre Dame." Notre Dame, of course, being one of his two operas then, and Hofmannsthal wrote Strauss. What a beautiful opera it was when he had heard it. Said completely silly libretto, absolute garbage, but the music is absolutely phenomenal, and so it is. But here, how silly the text may be, the singers, you've got to list the cast on that recording.
Oh my God, it is an extraordinary recording.
Yeah, with that time, the first time I met Gwyneth Jones there, Jimmy King, he always brought me cookies to the recording. I remember Jimmy King. He immediately know where are the best cookies in Berlin. Kurt Moll, then of course, as Quasimodo. And there was also this fantastic, what was his name? Hartmut Welker. I think his career is over since many years, but that time he was one of these fantastic black archidiaconus, the bad priest, you know, the amazing voice. So,
But you mentioned when listening to the intermezzo just now that you have memories of a different version.
Well, there's quite a bit to unpack here. The intermezzo never in the opera really comes as an intermezzo. It can be put in as an intermezzo, but the music for the intermezzo is the sort of the love interest music, the gypsy love interest music for Esmeralda. And the first thing that is fascinating, I'm so pleased we've heard some singing, is that it has become over the years this slow, turgid piece that lasts forever. If you know the opera, there are vocal lines over the top of the intermezzo music. They could never sing them at the speed that it's sometimes taken. The second thing is the intermezzo doesn't come from Notre Dame. Notre Dame comes from the intermezzo and carnival music, which comes from another of your discs, the Fantasy-Stücke for piano and orchestra, which Schmidt wrote when he was 21.
you're stealing my show because I
I'm
know.
sorry.
It's okay. You go on.
And this was a piece that he wrote as an engagement present to his wife, Caroline Pressen, who was very sadly later that year taken to the Steinhof, where she never escaped and was eventually
The psychiatry.
the psychiatric hospital, and was eventually murdered by the Nazis in I believe the early 40s. They had divorced by this point. But it's a really, I think it's a unique story in the history of sort of operas and bits taken out of operas, is that you have a piano concerto, which is created as a 3-movement in 1 movement piano concerto, which, just like the 4th Symphony, has a double structure of a sonata form. So there's a sonata form in the first movement, which turns into the carnival music. There's a sonata form over the whole piece, of which the intermezzo and then the finale music. The finale becomes the intermezzo becomes basically an inversion of the original theme. He takes out the piano part, he takes out the cadenza, and he smushes it together, but that's all he takes out. There's no structural changes. He turns it into carnival music and intermezzo from an imaginary romantic opera, around which he then writes Notre Dame. I think it's extraordinary that's the way. I mean, no wonder people complain that Notre Dame was too symphonic.
I'm not sure. Complaint was because when I heard Notre Dame, just re-listening in preparation for this podcast, I thought it is gorgeously symphonic. I mean, it is a symphony with an opera pasted on top of it. So,
Exactly. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
and variations were a theme, as it were, in his writing altogether. I mean, the Beethoven variations, the Hussar variations.
The Second Symphony, the Third Symphony, the finale is basically a set of rondo variations. I mean, you called him an Austrian composer earlier, and he really isn't. He's an Austro-Hungarian composer. I mean, he was born in Bratislava. He spoke 3 languages. He only moved to Vienna when he was 14.
Bratislava was Hungarian at that time?
His mother was Hungarian. He was very proud to be of, as he said, pure Magyar heritage.
Okay.
He was going to change his name to his mother's maiden name.
That's why there are these variations on the Hungary
Theme.
theme, yeah.
And that's why the intermezzo, the second subject of the Fourth Symphony, actually everywhere there's this Hungarian idea. Now, of course, it was everywhere from the Csardashes to the Hungarian dances to Liszt to Brahms. But for him, that was his Heimat, that was his homeland.
This is a good point because I can play a bit from this CD, from the variations on a Hussary song, or a Hussar song. Hussars?
Hussar, yeah.
Hussars, okay.
If I were just to listen to you and the music with the chorale theme and the development and taking it all, it almost sounds like Bruckner. But when you listen to the music, it sounds nothing like Bruckner at all. Really.
No, but it is constructed within that vein. Schmidt wanted to study with Bruckner, although he never did. He turned up to the lessons, and it was the year that Bruckner became ill and never turned up to teach. And after a few weeks, the Conservatoire nixed his course.
What might have been?
What might have been, or what was anyway. But what's amazing about, I talk all this musicological stuff, I don't know if anyone here will understand it.
No one understands it.
But the point about his music is that it's incredibly constructed in order to create emotions. For me, you don't need to know any of this to listen to his music. It is glorious and joyful much of the time.
I found it, a term that came to my mind when listening to the music was, for lack of a better one, sympathetic. There's something gentle in Schmidt. Certainly, you'd think being so romantic and being a bit grandiose, it's not bombastic at all. It doesn't feel like that.
It's anti-bombast. So we've just touched on Bruckner, who is always in his symphonies looking for God. Then you have Wagner, who always writes gods. I mean, even Tristan and Isolde are godlike. You have Mahler, who is searching for something universal and enormous. And then Schmidt, for me, is just searching for a single human, a single man, a single person. And that's the intimacy, the humanity that I find in his music, and I find it very necessary right now.
I know that Joe doesn't like me when I hold labels, no, CDs from another label into the
I'm
camera.
used already.
But first of all, I don't care. Secondly, we have a good excuse here because the Linos Ensemble is playing the quartet, for piano, left hand, clarinet, and string trio. It's a quintet, obviously, not a quartet.
Okay.
And the Linos Ensemble, of course, has played most of their stuff. Your labels are.
Yeah, I'm angry why they didn't made it on the coverage.
And If we're talking about Schmidt, there are maybe 3 famous recordings of Schmidt that are sort of among record collectors: the Sieben Meter Fourth, the Metropolis Seventh Seal, and then possibly the Yo-Yo Ma, Leon Fleischer, etc. Recording of the quintet. I really do you know that recording?
Yeah.
I really like that, and I'm not sure I've told you before. In the finale with the variations, I forgot what I was listening to for a second. I thought that Barenboim was doing some improvisation on the South American composer. It has something that is not at all maybe what you expect. A playfulness, a world of sound that comes out of nowhere almost.
I think they're extraordinary pieces, and I think these are the last 2 pieces he wrote, which people seem to forget. They're slightly sort of put into the shadows by the Deutsche Aufstehen, which he never wrote or never finished.
Oh, right, the infamous Hitler cantata.
This is a point we should brush on a bit. Why? For me, it's a feeling that Schmidt has the same stand like Pfitzner. Oh, this is all Nazi music. This is.
Well, I think there was this one big action, which he accepted a commission from the Third Reich to create a piece called the Deutsche Auferstehen with an appalling text, a really appalling nationalistic.
Sort of German revival or the rebirth of Germany.
And he accepted. And it is a big stain on his copybook. He never finished the piece. The music that he wrote is sort of childlike music. I mean, for him it was just, oh shit, I have to do this. Plus there are sort of contemporary accounts of, for instance, the niece of his wife remembers him saying that he felt like he had a gun to his head in order to do this. Then sort of a bit more contextual information. Most of his friends were Jewish.
The love of his life.
The love of his life, the big long, sort of possibly, we don't really know. This was an illegitimate relationship. They were both married. So we don't know exactly when bits of it began and finished, but sort of possibly 25, 30 years of his life with a Jewish heiress, Elizabeth Zweibeck. He had a Jewish son, Ludwig Zehner, who Ludwig didn't realize that Schmidt was his father, but Schmidt knew. Plus, there were accounts from Hans Keller, Ludwig Reiter, Oscar Adler, Georg Tintner, who knew Schmidt very well. And I think all apart from Reiter were Jewish. And they all claimed that there was not a sense of anti-Semitism. I mean, his friends, the people he invited into his house to play chamber music, were mostly Jewish musicians. He was definitely naive, and he made this action, which...
And only because of this one action, then he is still banned in our mind.
He didn't join the party?
He never joined the party. I mean, the Nazis loved his music.
Yeah, of course.
That's probably the biggest of the brown blots on his discussion, is that if the Nazis love your music, you're guilty by association.
And
but they also
performed
loved
his
Wagner.
music.
Well, then Wagner is guilty by association, very much so. I mean...
As always in our podcast, the question is how to get this music back in the concert halls. I mean, Schmidt is amazing music.
Well, only the music can ultimately communicate that. Right?
And I think that's the key. It needs to be heard.
I mean, he played Schmidt in the Turkey. He played Schmidt in
If
Wales.
you can get the Welsh...
Do you know when the Vienna Philharmonic last time played Schmidt? 10 years ago or what?
Probably exactly. The Seventh Symphony with Bitchkov was the last time. You want to follow it up with a recording of the Seventh Seal?
I would love to. I would absolutely love to. I'd love to tackle much more Schmidt. If anyone has an orchestra and a good Helden tenor, I'm there.
So I think we really had a very interesting talk now with Jonathan Beerman. Thank you that you joined our podcast.
It's been a great pleasure. And
And
sorry
we
for
could-
speaking so much.
We could talk with a half American guy, British guy, Austrian, about Franz Schmidt, Austrian composer. Hungaro, Austria, I'm sorry. It's like they say I'm not allowed to say film composer. No, composer. Okay, the Hungaro-Austrian composer. But thank you very much that you joined our podcast and hope to see you next time.